Name is Trisha Shimamura. Perfect. My name is Trisha Shimamura, and I'm the Director of Community Affairs here in the Manhattan Borough President's Office. If you're here, then I hope that you are here because you are interested in learning more about governance, about parliamentary procedure, and that you found out about this because you saw some of our promotion around the leadership training series. One role of the Borough President's Office is to try to provide technical assistance and support to our community boards. We have heard from not just community board members, but also just members of the general community here in Manhattan about your interest in participating in trainings that really build civic leadership, build engagement, help you become stronger leaders in your own communities. And so this is why we're all here today. Today's training is going to be focused on, again, parliamentary procedure. We're really excited to hear from Karen Coughlin, who's going to give you a little bit more about her bio in a bit. But just a couple housekeeping things. First and foremost, I need to give a huge shout out to our community affairs team, and particularly Porfirio Figueroa from that team, who's done so much in terms of organizing this whole series. We have a ton of webinars and in-person events that are going to be happening this week and early next week. I want to encourage you all to look at online our whole lineup. And also really want to give a shout out to our Friday event, which is going to be held at John Jay College. It's emergency preparedness training, only an hour in partnership with New York State. If you sign up and register beforehand, then you also get to walk away with a really great go bag full of first aid stuff and other emergency preparedness supplies. So we really hope that you join us in person. Also, thank you to Dawn and to Eric and to everybody else on our community affairs team who are kind of in the background here, making sure that everything goes smoothly. Housekeeping wise, you may have noticed that there in the left-hand corner of your screen is a little recording button. That's purposeful. We are recording all of the trainings that we're holding this week. So if you have to leave early, if you know of another board member, another neighbor, friend of yours who really wanted to go to one of these trainings, don't worry. All of them are being recorded. They're all going to be up on our YouTube page following the end of this week. But we hope that you stay here in person because it's the best way for you to get some questions answered and for you to get that to walk away with a better understanding of just some of these kind of core principles, some of the resources that are available to you so that you can use them in your own districts. Finally, just before we go full into parliamentary procedure, I just wanted to say a few notes about this topic. We have been searching for a while now, trying to find Karen and find other experts on parliamentary procedure who could help shed some light on just best practices, on the good ideas and good notions to keep in mind to better explain what some of these kind of phrases that you may hear in community boards meetings mean. All of these kind of things, so that you can, if you are on a community board or if you are serving in some other board that uses Robert's rules or is structured on has a parliamentary structure, that you feel more empowered to act and to lead in those situations. I will just say though that every board has its bylaws that you should be familiar with, that you should have a copy of. There are tons of situations that may arise where something may sound a little different than what you're doing. And so before you, get nervous that something that you're doing is incorrect or wrong, I would really recommend that you take a look at those bylaws, that you have conversations with your chairs. We also, if you are a community board member, you have your lawyers are the City of New York Law Department, and we are more than happy to connect you with those resources if you have any questions. Later on this week, we're going to be doing a conflicts of interest training, which sometimes comes up in these conversations when we talk about parliamentary procedure, sometimes, but not always. So if you have questions about that, there's the conflicts of interest board. And then of course, you always have us. Our office is here to help and support you. I'm the director of community affairs, but I have the honor and privilege of overseeing a large unit of community affairs liaisons who really focus in on various neighborhoods throughout the borough, and you should have their contact information as well. If you have any questions like that, feel free to put them in the chat. We're gonna get started here, and I guess I'll end with just reminding you all that this is just the start of the conversation. Really, we designed this series to be with the goal of you being able to walk away with a little bit more information about the topic at hand, some best practices, a good list of resources, and knowing who the contact is so that if you want to learn more, if you want to have, further the conversation, then you know how to do so. And so with that, I'll just ask that Eric and Porfirio make sure that you put your contact information into the chat so that everybody has that as a good starting point. I'm gonna say that we are gonna end this right at 1 o'clock, if not a little earlier than that, so that everybody can get on with their day. And I do sincerely hope to see many of you throughout the rest of this week. We have another training this evening that I can't remember. I think it's conflicts of interest, but I may have to double checked. And then we again have a bunch of trainings throughout the week. And I really do hope to see you in person on Friday. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Karen, and thank you again, Karen, for being here today.
Great. Thank you, Tricia and Porfirio and Eric and everybody. Thank you all for being here. So yeah, my name is Karen Coughlin. I am the parliamentarian for the City University of New York, the University Faculty Senate. And before I go on, I have to give my disclaimer. All the views that I present here today are my own, not the University Faculty Senate, not CUNY, not New York City College of Technology, where I teach, no one else, just me. So just let's see. And I will be sharing my screen today. Let's see. And this is my very low tech version of slides. Can everybody see that? Can folks see that? Great.
You're good,
great.
Karen.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So just so you have my name there. And it's in a Word document that I will scroll through like this for a few reasons. One is I can't stand PowerPoint. And the main reason is that I use this when I teach something along these lines. And I find that then when we're done, it's easy for me to convert into a document that I can then share. So I share it with my students, and here I'll be sharing it with you, that if it's useful to you as a reference, you'll have it handy. It has some citations and things in it. So that's why it's this kind of low tech version. So this is my roadmap, my agenda for today. I'll give a little introduction of who I am, and equally importantly, who I am not. Then we'll talk about some of the governing laws and rules, a little bit of background on parliamentary procedure and Robert's rules. I'll address some questions that I understand that you folks in the audience have raised. Also some issues that I have encountered in my experience as a parliamentarian, things that come up frequently. And then finally, we'll leave some time to address your questions. So I'll take it off the share for now. And so again, who I am the parliamentarian for the City University of New York, University Faculty Senate. The University Faculty Senate is the faculty governance body of CUNY, comprised of representatives elected by the faculty at all the respective CUNY campuses. And we sit in an advisory position to the CUNY administration. I'm a member of the University Faculty Senate. I was elected. My full-time job is I teach in the Department of Law and Paralegal Studies at New York City College of Technology in downtown Brooklyn. So I was elected by my colleagues to represent City Tech on the Faculty Senate back in 2017. I've been reelected a couple of times, and I now serve as the vice chair. I'm an attorney. I was a clerk for a federal magistrate judge. I then spent about 12 years as a commercial and antitrust litigator, first in private practice, and then I was with the New York State Attorney General's office. And from there, I came to CUNY to teach full time. And this is actually my second time around, my second career as a teacher. Before I went to law school, I taught 7th and 8th grade social studies in the New York City public schools for 6 years. Not really relevant to this program, but just want to give a shout out to all of our New York City school teachers who are in the audience. It's a great job. It's a really tough job, and God bless you all for doing it. Anyway, that's who I am. Here's who I am not. I am not a licensed, certified, or otherwise formally trained parliamentarian. And if folks want to sign off of this Zoom right now on that basis, I will totally understand. I had no experience as a parliamentarian before I joined the University Faculty Senate. Shortly after I was elected, the chair at the time contacted me. She saw that I was an attorney, and she contacted me, and she figured I could do the job because I had experience reading rules and applying them to situations, particularly procedural rules. And that is true. So I took it on just kind of with the disclaimer that I had no experience, but I would do my best. I have learned it entirely on the job, as I have gone along. And I guess I'm doing okay because I've been reappointed to the position every year since then. But I have no magic powers, no secret knowledge. What I have is a book. Okay, I have Robert's Rules of Order, and here is my copy of the book, and you can see it's all tabbed up. That's what I have, and it has an excellent index. So when issues come up, I look them up and I read the rules and I figure out what to do as best I can. Thankfully, in my practice, not a lot of issues arise in real time during a meeting, so I don't have to make a whole lot of parliamentary calls on the fly. And usually it's in advance of meetings, so I have time to look things up. But when I need to, I do. I also have internet access, and which has some great resources, some of which I'll refer to and show to you today, for using following Robert's rules, parliamentary procedure, and you can find this through a very simple Google search. So while it does help that I'm an attorney, it is absolutely not necessary. And if you can read and you can use the internet, you too can be a parliamentarian. So I just don't be afraid of it. You can do it. For some of these reasons, and because I am a human being, you may ask me some questions today that I cannot answer right away. I promise you, though, I will take them into advisement. I will find out the answers and get back to you either through the Borough President's office or directly through my email. So that is my introduction. Okay. So let's come back and go back to my sharing. And we'll dig in. Okay, so let's talk about some of the governing laws and rules that apply to meetings of the community boards. And I'm going to talk about these first before we get into parliamentary procedure, because these are, if you are, and which you are, the community boards are subject to these state laws. These supersede Robert's Rules of Order, parliamentary procedure, any individual bylaws, they supersede everything. And we at the University Faculty Senate, we are also subject to these. So I have experience with them. So kind of the main provisions are the New York State Open Meetings Law. Okay, there's also the Freedom of Information Law, commonly known as FOIL. And then the General Construction Law, which provides the definitions of some of the terms that are used in the Open Meetings and Freedom of Information Law. And somebody identified a question, I understand, already addressed a question that they would like to see answered today about, are there good practices to be used by executive committees when it comes to bylaws? And I'm hoping that, I think, again, these laws will supersede whatever any individual bylaws are. So I'm not sure if this discussion will address that question, but I'm hoping that it will. But otherwise, if not, you're welcome to contact me or let me know, and I can address something more specific. Okay, so let's talk about some of the provisions here. And again, I'm going to be sharing this document with anybody who is interested. So if it's helpful to you. So the state open meetings law, okay, holds that the public has the right to attend any meeting of any public body of which you are. Okay, this includes the committees and the subcommittees. The organization must provide public advance notice for a meeting. A meeting scheduled a week or more in advance. Notice needs to be provided at least 72 hours before the meeting. If it's scheduled less than a week in advance, it's just the law states reasonable time prior. Written minutes must be taken and made available to the public. It must consist of a record or a summary of any motions, proposals, resolutions, any other matter formally voted upon, and the vote thereon. And it must be made available to the public within 2 weeks from the meeting. Doesn't mean you send it around, but if anybody comes asking for it, you need to be able to provide it to them. Okay. FOIL, our Freedom of Information law, additionally requires a record of each member's final vote on all matters. Okay. What this means, and this was something we were enlightened to at University Faculty Senate, no secret ballots. There can't be any secret ballots. So there needs to be somehow, you don't have to announce the votes in front of everyone, but again, this is something if someone comes later asking for the record of how each individual voted, you need to be able to provide it to them. Finally, the general construction law, and that is just a law that includes definitions that apply throughout state law. But what is key for us and for you is the definition of quorum. Okay, so quorum is required to do business. This is section 41 of the general construction law. And what it means is a majority of the whole number of members. And this is a question that has come up with us numerous times, if it's okay to just have a majority well, usually again, when it comes to voting, whether, you can have a majority of the people in the room. But so quorum means a majority of the whole number of members, and the whole number of members means the total number of members in the body if all seats were filled. So we at the Faculty Senate, we have a lot of vacancies. Each campus is assigned a certain number of seats, and a lot of those seats are not filled. Our whole number, nonetheless, which I think is 144 seats, possible members. So it is half plus one, 50% plus one of the 144 in order to do any kind of business. Okay, so it's that majority of a total number of members of the body. Similarly, a majority of that whole number is required to take any action. So it's not just a majority of the people in the room, it is the majority of the total possible votes. Again, if every seat were filled, if every member were present in the room, even if they're not. This can make things very difficult. It has made things very difficult for us at University Faculty Senate, particularly when we barely have a quorum, and then you end up needing, in order to pass any resolution or take any action, you need to have practically sometimes an actual unanimous vote. So, but please be aware of that. Okay. All right. So let's talk now about parliamentary procedure and Robert's rules. So just a little bit of background, parliamentary procedure. It's the term used referring to the generally accepted rules, precedents, and practices commonly employed in the governance of deliberative assemblies, such as the community boards, such as the University Faculty Senate. They originated in the early British parliaments in the 16th century. They were subsequently used by the American colonists when they came to the colonies. The first articulation of parliamentary principles for the new American government was by Thomas Jefferson, published in 1801. So Robert's Rules of Order, what are Robert's Rules? That is the quintessential codification of parliamentary procedural rules. It was first published in 1876, and the 12th edition is the most recent, published in 2020. And I'm going to, let's see if I can do a new share here. And there it is. There's our Robert's Rules, our 12th edition. Here's what it looks like. Let's see, let me come back to, it was, so here's the author is U.S. Army Major, who was later Brigadier General Henry Martin Robert. The story per the Robert's Rules official website is that Major Robert was an engineering officer in the Army, and without warning, he was asked to preside over a public meeting held in a church in his community. And when he went, he realized he did not know what he was doing, and it was absolute chaos. So he tried anyway, and the quote is, his embarrassment was supreme. He was determined never to attend another meeting, or run another meeting at least, until he knew something about parliamentary law. So he studied what books he could find available and put together, in his travels, he found what he referred to as virtual parliamentary anarchy, since individuals from different parts of the country had differing ideas of the correct procedure. So to bring order out of that chaos, he decided to write Robert's Rules of Order. And I will show you our good friend. Let's see if I get to do a share for that also. And here, there he is. He looks very disturbed. I can see him going, this is anarchy. I'm going to write some rules to bring some order about. So anyway, so that's a little bit of background. I'll come back to it. All right, so now are we looking at the outline again?
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Great. Okay, great, thank you. All right, so some of the principles, general principles underlying parliamentary law and Robert's Rules of Order. And these are good to keep in mind, because it's when you understand where what's kind of the theory behind the rules, it'll help you to apply them when something seems ambiguous. So this, there are a number of different formulations of this, but this one, I like this. This actually came from the American Legion, that their principles are, first, justice and courtesy to all. Everyone should be able to be entitled to have their voice heard on a topic. Also, that decorum should be maintained during a meeting. Everyone should treat everyone else with respect. One thing at a time. Things in meetings, at least in ours, can start to, people start bringing up new topics and want to address them in the time that they want to address them. And Robert's Rules requires that each question is addressed before we move onto the next topic. Rule of the majority kind of speaks for itself, that no action should be taken unless a majority supports it. However, also the right of the minority, okay, to have their voices heard, and to have their views considered. So it's helpful. I think it's helpful to keep these in mind when you're addressing questions, because sometimes things will come up. Robert's Rules is a very thick book, and it has provides a lot of different scenarios that very often you'll find your situation addressed in there, but sometimes you won't. Sometimes you just won't find something, and it'll be a question on how to apply a rule in your situation. So when you have these principles in mind, it'll help guide you to figure out what is the best way to address the situation you're considering. It also helps you to understand some of the rules. For example, there are certain votes that require a 2/3 majority rather than just a simple majority, a 50% plus one. And that has to do with, in particular, protecting the right of the minority, where if someone's, for example, and for justice, for people to be able to have their voices heard. So an example is where you're cutting off someone's right to have their voice heard on a particular topic. That's where you're going to need to have a 2/3 majority. Things like ending debate and going to a vote, where you may be cutting off people's right to have their voices heard. So anyway, it's helpful to keep that in mind. And the purpose of all of this is to facilitate the transaction of business and to expedite meetings, to keep things moving along efficiently, so that we can, in the words of our mayor, GSD, get stuff done. That's why we meet, right? We want to get stuff done. And so that really is the purpose of all this. Okay, so let's talk about, I'm going to start by addressing a couple of questions that I understand you all have posed, wanted to have answers. And there are a few that I received this morning, and they're addressed in later parts of, conveniently, I had already addressed them in my planned presentation. So I will hopefully cover all those questions at some point during this program. So one question was, what is the structure of a meeting? Okay. And this is, generally, this is a general structure in the order deemed appropriate, and each organization will differ to some extent, but this is kind of an order that is recommended by Robert's rules. Most important, before the meeting begins, the chair needs to ensure that a quorum is present. Now, what if there isn't? Do you sit around and twiddle your thumbs? Oh, and I will, just to come back on quorum. According to Robert's rules, technically, if you don't have it, essentially you should go home. There are a few limited abilities that a group, a meeting that does not have a quorum can, actions that they can take, things like adjourning, or take efforts to try and obtain a quorum. If you can call people up and get them into the room, you can do that. At the University Faculty Senate, we don't do that very often. We, at the beginning, when it's time to start a meeting, we don't have quorum in the room. And I will say, since coming back from the pandemic, since we've been back in person, we had numerous meetings where we never achieved a quorum. We still held the meeting. We held it as an informational meeting. So we would have discussions about, events or issues that we should be considering. We would have guest speakers come in, but we did not pass any resolutions. We technically could not have even adopted an agenda, but, we went forward without just doing the best that we could, at least to be able to provide information in the meeting. So that will be up to you, but technically quorum needs to be present. I need you to excuse me 1 second. I have these lights in my office that turn off. Okay. Automatically if I'm sitting behind my desk for too long, and then I'm sitting in the dark. Okay, but now they're back on. So the chair should ensure quorum. The chair calls the meeting to order. You would review and approve an agenda. Not every, it depends on how you handle the agendas. If it's just sent out as an agenda, that is just presumed to be adopted, that's fine. It's all the way we do it. We send out an agenda and we introduce it at the beginning of a meeting and invite approval. So, and then we have a vote to approve the agenda. You would review and approve minutes of the last meeting, however it can be done. It doesn't need to be read aloud, whatever is your preference. Then there would be items like if there are reports of officers appropriate, any committee reports, any old business, unfinished business that carried over, anything that was not completed in the last meeting. Any new business, you invite anyone to introduce any new matters, and finally an adjournment. So that would be a general structure of the meeting to be tailored for your group as you see fit. Another question that came up was, what is a point of information? And I actually broadened it. What are points of anything? Because there's actually a bunch of them, of these items that are addressed as points. So I figured we cover them all because they're not to, so they don't get confused, and also because they're quite useful. They can be quite useful. So so these points and what each of these items are, these are for situations during a meeting that should be accorded immediate attention, but that do not require or even warrant the whole process of bringing a motion, getting a second, having a debate, or voting. Okay, it's something that an individual can just call it out without being recognized by the chair. Of course, this is always, this is should be construed narrowly. That otherwise it can cause the chaos that our friend Robert was trying to avoid by writing these rules. But as long as used judiciously, they can be very helpful. Okay. So a point of information that would be used to identify a brief, keyword being brief, additional item of information regarding a topic, using a short, non-debatable statement. Okay, and this is enabling members to make fully informed votes. It should not be an issue of opinion or whether an item should be voted on. It would be a factual statement, an item of information. A couple of other of these types of points. A point of order. Okay, that would be where one might draw attention if there is a breach, some kind of a breach of the rules or improper procedure in how the meeting is being handled. Someone would raise a point of order. Okay. And the way that this should be done would be promptly when the breach occurs, or whenever the issue that you want to ask for the point of order on, promptly when it occurs. If the meeting continues and other issues are addressed in between, then it becomes moot. This needs to be addressed immediately. The point of information also, that's something that also should be handled immediately, right, with the item that it pertains to. For the point of inquiry, okay, that's something where if someone's giving a report, if a committee chair is giving a report on the committee's activities, as an example, this could be, if you're asking for a clarification of something that was stated regarding the report, or an inquiry regarding the applicable parliamentary rules, this would be a point of inquiry. Finally, the point of personal privilege. This is very things like the temperature in the room, the noise in the room. If this is something that you want to have addressed, to have people quiet down, if the room is too hot, too cold, whatever it is, that would be a point of personal privilege. Okay. And again, there are some additional issues that some questions that were raised, but I think they in what I had already put together of the presentation, I think these are all going to get addressed, so I hope so. So these are issues that I have encountered in my experience that come up a lot at the University Faculty Senate, and I know one of them is the proper motion procedure. And I will preface this with, don't get too nuts about it. People a lot of times get very caught up in making sure that each of the proper steps are followed, and it is helpful, and to the extent that it's going to make the movement of the meeting efficient, and ensure that everyone has their ability to have say, then it definitely should be followed. But don't get too crazy about it, and because I know people can find it rather frightening. But this is a pretty basic motion procedure, and this again, depending on your organization. Some organizations only use motion procedure for things like if they want to pass a resolution or create a new rule for the organization, whatever, it's those kinds of big actions. Others will use them for even things like adopting an agenda, for approving the minutes. So it really is up to the organization on how you apply them. Okay. So the proper motion procedure, the steps. The first would be whoever is the member who wants to make the motion, they would request recognition by the chair, whatever way this is customary. Okay. So if this is, if it's a matter of raising your hand, if you are doing a virtual meeting, if you're doing that raise hand or put something into the chat, whatever it is, the way that we do it at University Faculty Senate, we have a podium. So when people want to speak on a matter, they will approach the podium and line up and await recognition by the chair. So however it is that your organization handles it. When the member who wants to bring the motion is recognized, then the member would be recognized by the chair, given the ability to speak, the permission to speak, and the member would then propose the motion. And you say, I move that, whatever your proposal is. I move that we adopt a resolution X, Y, and Z, whatever your proposal is. Okay. And that's it. You state what the proposal is. You don't then get into a discussion of the merits. You just state what the proposal is. Then you need a second to the motion. Okay. If no one seconds it, the motion fails. If you get the second, the chair would then state what the motion is to the assembly. They make this, a motion has been made to adopt the resolution that X, Y, Z. A motion has been made to, adopt the agenda, whatever it is, and then opens it to discussion or debate. Okay. Again, speakers would then request and receive recognition from the chair in order to participate in the debate, in order to give their view on whether a particular motion should be adopted. Okay. When the debate is concluded, the chair would then take a vote on the motion. Okay, remember, under the open meetings law, we need to have a record of each vote. If it's a paper ballot, you need to somehow be able to connect the ballots, whether people write their names on them or connect the ballots. People use another organization I'm involved in. We use numbers, a numbering system, so we know what person had each number. If you take the vote by show of hands, somebody has to write down who voted in favor, who voted against, who abstained. Finally, the chair announces the results of the vote. Okay. So that's our motion procedure. Other issues that have arisen, again, in my experience, are how to keep the meeting in control. Sometimes, particularly if there's a contentious issue, you can have people speaking over each other. People might take too long in what they're addressing. They might be addressing issues that are not germane, not on the topic that we're discussing. Also with time limits in our meetings for the Faculty Senate, we're on a strict time limit where at 8, we'll go from 6:30 to 8 p.m. and at 8 p.m. we are getting kicked out of the building or kicked out of the room. So we have to stay on our time limit. So we've come up with some strategies, some tools that are provided by Robert's Rules in order to do this. And they largely pertain to the chair's authority. And for the chair to be sure to maintain control. And the chair has a lot of authority. It's within the chair's authority to take steps that are needed to ensure good decorum. Okay, deciding things like points of order, whether there has been some kind of a breach of the rules or not. The chair's authority includes controlling speeches or speakers within the limits of the rules, that everyone still needs to be, and everyone is still entitled to have their say, but still to be able to control, to make sure that some people don't monopolize the conversation. Also, the chair has the authority to decline to recognize dilatory, absurd, frivolous motions and conduct, where conduct seems designed to disrupt the meeting. Okay. Some, kind of tips or strategies that we found effective in controlling the time and efficiency of the meeting. One is setting an agenda that includes time limits. The agenda will say from, 6:30 to 6:35, review the minutes, 6:35, to 7:05, we have a speaker, and then to stick to it, to stick to those time limits. I have encouraged my chairs under whom I have served to do this consistently. Be sure to do this consistently and explicitly, to state during the meeting, so no one it doesn't seem as though it all of a sudden might be enforced in order to quiet a particular individual. There's also a motion to limit debate that is available. Okay. This would not be appropriate brought by the chair. Chair is not an appropriate person to be bringing motions, but you know, it could be arranged that it could be brought by someone else to bring a motion to limit the debate. This can be used to reduce the number or limit the number or length of speeches, the number of speeches or the length of the speeches. Okay, or to say we're going to end debate at a certain time. Okay, at 6:45, whatever time the debate will end. This is one of those ones that requires a 2/3 vote because you're cutting off individuals' right to speak. So potentially, if you're cutting off debate at 6:45 and you have 5 people waiting to speak, so that's something that would need a 2/3 majority in order to pass. An issue that comes up with us is what we call wordsmithing resolutions, where there will be a resolution will be proposed by a committee, and folks may want to put a comma here and there, and it can get a little bit unwieldy. So one way to do this, to avoid that, is to have a resolution be pre-circulated, and then it would be proposed as printed. And I'm just noting here in the outline the sections of Robert's rules where these the instructions, the details on how to bring these different motions are found, and this will be circulated. And I am keeping an eye on the time, so I'm going to start moving a little more quickly. This is actually also required by Robert's rules to ensure that each member speaks no more than twice on the same question during a meeting. This is something that would be the responsibility of the chair, and to make sure that each individual those individuals who want to speak twice, they would not speak a second time unless every member who wants to speak has already spoken. Okay, I hope that was clear. So make sure that each member speaks no more than twice on the same question, and they don't get their second chance unless if there is any member who has not yet spoken who has requested to do so. Okay. And also debate being confined to the pending question, that avoid any personal meaning directed at the person perhaps who is presenting a motion, observations, comments, attacks, allusions to the motives of members. This is all within the control of the chair to restrict that. That goes against the principles of Robert's rules. Okay. Some common misunderstandings that we have encountered. And I think this is one that was also raised. A question was asked about what it means to table. People talk about moving to table something, and I get no. Tabling is just because it's very difficult. You need to have a whole separate motion. Tabling kind of sends something out, into the ether, into the no man's land. Where it would need a new motion to bring it back as business in a later meeting, as new business in a later meeting, or even as old business. Usually what an individual says, oh, let's table this, or I make a motion to table, usually the motion that they really intend is what's called postponing to a certain time. So you would be pushing something to perhaps the next meeting, and that's what you would push it. And the reasons that you would be using something like this is if you're getting near the end of time for a meeting, if the meeting is scheduled to end at a certain time, there won't be time for discussion, or the debate shows that there is some reason to hold off on the decision. People need to think more about it. Maybe there will be some kind of revisions made to a particular resolution or whatever it is. But generally, it is the motion to postpone to a certain time rather than tabling. I'm going to skip this about calling or moving the question. That's just a kind of an issue of semantics. A friendly amendment, because this is something that I know a question was also raised about, and a friendly amendment really does not exist. And by that, I just mean that an amendment is an amendment. So no matter how friendly it is, no matter how much everyone likes it, it still needs to undergo the regular process. And let me actually now share with you, there are some great resources online for amendments, also for all processes regarding Robert's rules. And I meant to present these earlier. Let me do a new share. Let's see. Okay. Not this, that's my, are you looking at amendments illustrated?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is for an amendment. I found this online, and again, I have the citations to all of these in the document that I can circulate. So this is kind of a little step by step on how to bring an amendment. I'm just going to show you a couple of other. There are tremendous resources online. These little cheat sheets at a glance. And if you just literally put in Google parliamentary procedures at a glance or cheat sheet for Robert rules, you will come up with many, many very handy resources like this. This is one that I use that I unfortunately, it no longer exists online anymore. I couldn't find it anywhere, but it's another, this is the one that I use. I keep this handy during meetings. So these are very handy little charts. Okay, let me come back. And I know we want to finish up so we can get to some other questions. Another item that does not exist is people have referred to like an abstention vote, or really the question is what happens when one abstains. And it's kind of an oxymoron. There is no such thing as an abstention vote. If you abstain, you are refusing to vote. And in a system like ours, where a majority of the entire body, this is under that the open meetings law and the general construction law, where you need a majority of the entire body to do any business, an abstention has the same effect as a vote of no, to where you would not be able to get that majority of the entire body, possibly. And I understand that you have you hold meetings electronically, or at least hybrid, partly electronic. And this is something what we were for a short while holding through COVID, I should say, not really that short of a while, but holding our meetings entirely online on Zoom. So we looked into what some of the rules were. And again, this is under Robert's rules. Robert's rules requires what it refers to as simultaneous oral, meaning sound communication among all participating members, equivalent to those of meetings held in one room or area. And on this basis, we decided not to be using the chat, because it's not, this is something that would not be, it's not going to be the same as when everyone is in the room and everyone is hearing what everyone else is saying. So we decided not to use the chat, but that would be up to you. Okay, well, we have I hope a few minutes. That's the presentation that I prepared. Again, I will be sharing this this document and a more detailed version with citations and to the group, however, anyone who wants it, whatever is the easiest way to do that. So do we have any questions?
Erin, thank you so much for this. This was fantastic, and I wrote down kind of furious notes on this. Just a reminder to everybody who's here, please submit your questions to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. That means if you hover over the bottom portion of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A button. You can click on that and submit a question. Happy to answer them. A few observations, and then I do have one question for you, Karen. First, I just want to observe that this is our second year that we've done this. The first year we kind of see people, especially on Zoom, kind of pop in and out and that sort of thing, but I've never kind of seen this many folks stay on consistently, over 50% participation and attendance on this one throughout the entire presentation. So thank you so much. You are clearly talking to a very interested audience, and we really appreciate your time. I want to just flag a few things. When you bring up open meetings law, particularly to a group of folks who are involved with the community board or a CEC, There are a lot of stuff that comes up because we are in this kind of hybrid world, at least for a few more months, until maybe the legislation on open meetings law gets changed again. So if you have questions about that, I will say that every board had to, per open meetings law, they had to pass a resolution on what they were going to do during this time. I think that the vast majority of community boards in Manhattan decided to try to go the hybrid route, although not all. So if you have specific questions about that, we can answer them. You can also reach us offline to talk about that if you have any questions about that piece. Karen, my question has to do with minutes versus transcripts, or even recordings. I think that per the open meetings law, they talk about you having to have a full recording of your meeting, especially in the kind of virtual, in the like kind of online meeting space. You had to have a recording of your meeting posted online. But I've always found it interesting for some. I think some people kind of looked at transcripts as like as equivalent of minutes. It's not in my mind, but could you talk a little bit about minutes versus transcripts?
Sure. I mean, I don't think it is, and I have my copy of open meetings law back here, but I think open meetings law specifically requires minutes, that minutes be taken. So I don't think that a transcript can substitute. I mean, it's a summary. Minutes are supposed to be a summary, and the purpose of, one of the purposes of the minutes is so that, under FOIL, the Freedom of Information Law, that someone can, this is supposed to be transparency of government, right? And so if you want to find out what happened in a meeting, it would be really kind of unwieldy to say, here's a transcript, or here's a recording, sit and listen to 2 hours when you're, want to find one small piece of information. So I think that is the kind of theory behind that, providing a summary so that it is useful. And if somebody in follow-up wanted to request a transcript. So yeah, I think you do want to have the summary, that actual minutes document. And I'm sorry, Tricia, was there a second part to?
No, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
I see that we've had a bunch of questions come in, so I'm gonna ask you a couple of them kind of rapidly. But looking at them, I just want to touch base on one more thing. We're gonna have a presentation, I think tomorrow night or tonight, I can't remember, on conflicts of interest. That's where we do have folks from the Conflicts of Interest Board coming in to talk about abstaining because you have a conflict in that, and how you go about doing that. So to one question that was asked about, can abstaining not be used in a meeting, that's not accurate. You can use, you must abstain, in fact, in some cases. I think
Sure.
what Karen was saying was that when you abstain, it is the equivalent of it's a no. Is that correct?
It's just in counting the votes. So
Okay.
we all live in this world where our quorum is, or to have, sorry, in order to do any business, you need to have 50% plus one of the entire body, whether they're there or not. So if you're sitting in, if you abstain from them, so that means that, say you have 100 people, you need to have 51 votes in favor of whatever the action is. So if somebody abstains, that is one less vote in favor. So even though you're not saying, that you're against it, it's still, what you need is those votes in favor of whatever the action is. So that's what I meant by that.
That makes sense. And thank you for that. A couple of questions I'm going to ask you, and then maybe you can answer a couple of them. What about when a person has something to say under point of personal privilege? Can they speak about something another board member said about them? So what are the limits of personal privilege? Another question for you, board members often yell out, call the question, and assume that it should immediately end debate and move to a vote. I think you've already discussed that, but maybe you can readdress that. And then what about this idea of present not voting? So I think that's similar to abstaining, but
I think so.
maybe you can, oh yes, they're saying someone with a conflict and they must state their conflict. So some of these things, if you don't feel good about it, we can also, I will just say again, we're going to talk about more about abstaining in conflict and the conflict of interest training tonight. But Karen, if you could maybe touch base on those three, I guess, like the limitations of point of personal privilege and calling the question and abstaining.
So, yeah, the point of personal privilege, I mean, it's, part of this is courtesy, maintaining decorum. I mean, you don't want to get into some individual, name calling or anything. But so it might be it to the extent, and again, and this is also going to be within the authority of the chair, right, to determine, to address a point of personal privilege. So if somebody wants to raise an issue on how another member is speaking, it may be, if you can do it kind of anonymously, like if point of personal privilege, can we all please refrain from making personal attacks on other members, or whatever way that you can do that without getting into a increasing the attacks of the meeting would be useful. We also, and I'll say, it's the extent that issues can be raised outside of a meeting. I had a member after one of our most recent meetings bring an item to the attention of myself and the chair of conduct that was going on, where people were kind of having these little private side conversations, and it was very distracting. So we were able to address that to the whole group without singling anyone out. The next one was calling the question. And we had this, and I'm kind of laughing because this was something people would just start yelling out, call the question. And no, you have to be, and again, this is Robert's rules. So, what your organization does, that will be up to you. But if you're following Robert's rules, you need to be, you can only make a motion to call the question when it's your turn. So you get in whatever is the queue, you need to seek recognition from the chair, and get yourself into the queue, whatever it is. Again, like I said, for us, it's, we line up again in front of a podium. So when you come up, if you want to make the motion to call the question, to bring it to a vote, then you can do that. But that is not something that can be called out randomly. And then that last one, it sounded like was it sounded like what you were saying, a no vote or something, like not voting. It sounds like an abstention to me, which would have the effect that I mentioned earlier.
Great. Somebody asked, just a note, Porfirio, if you could please put your contact information into the full chat for everyone, not just hosts and panelists, but for everyone. That was one question. And then a question about the difference between abstaining and recusing and how it would affect the vote.
I mean, again, it's you're a member of the body, and I mean, I don't think you would recuse. I mean, usually a recusal is where, you might remove yourself from the situation entirely. But I think as far as voting, there is no separate voting mechanism of a recusal. It's just because you would have recused yourself from the discussion of a topic, you would then be abstaining when it comes to the vote.
And I think that we can get into more of this with the conflict of interest training this evening. And if I'm Eric, tell me if I'm wrong on this. My understanding, though, and if my memory serves me, this would come into this for community boards. For example, if I own a bar in the neighborhood and my bar is going to before your community board for it to ask for a liquor license, I cannot, due to conflicts of direct financial personal gain, I would not be able to vote on this. I believe that you can still participate in discussion, but you'd have to identify that you are abstaining from this vote. You can participate in discussion, but you cannot, you're not voting for cause, which is the same thing as abstaining. Another example would be if like you are the principal of an architecture firm and your firm is representing your client, and that client is going before the community board for a land use action of some kind, kind of same thing. Better to be discussed, frankly, with the conflicts of interest board, which is the agency that really does oversee those types of conflicts, and that will again plug that's gonna that will happen tonight.
Sorry, when you're done.
Yes.
I just want, if I could just share the screen one more time before you sign off.
Please go ahead.
I just wanted to provide, and this is just in case, because I know we didn't get to, I don't think we got to address all the questions, and people may think of things later. Yeah. So I want to say thank you, and this is my email address. So people are welcome to email me directly or send through Trisha or whoever, but you're welcome to email me directly. Sorry.
Thanks, Karen. So we are at 102, and I really try to be strict with this. I know that there are still a couple questions popping in. I would recommend that you reach out to Porfirio, to Eric. You can reach out to myself or directly to Karen. We're happy to help. I will just also say that, you know, again, this is not really to show how every community board is not reaching the what they should be doing in parliamentary procedure. This is not to get anybody in trouble or do anything like that. This is really to give everybody, to empower folks with the better understanding of best practices of how yeah, Porfirio, can you put Karen's information into the chat? Of how this body conducts themselves by someone who we really respect and we understand has been doing this well. If you have any questions about something that is brought up that maybe has come up with your board and maybe there is something that can be improved, I will tell you that every board has those things that can be improved. And so I hope you reach out to us, and we're happy to help connect the dots or help answer questions or help have another conversation about how a situation or, you know, a voting situation could have gone down differently, or to avoid issues of the past. I love the idea of justice and courtesy for all. I feel like we should probably stamp that on all of our stuff with regards to community affairs. But I will certainly take away that from this conversation today. And Karen, I just really want to thank you so much. This is really helpful. We got a lot of comments about how useful this training is. It is being recorded, and we will put it up on your YouTube page probably in the next week or so once we're done. But thank you again, Karen. Thank you to everybody who stuck it out with us in the end here, and looking forward to seeing you either tonight or in another training, or hopefully on Monday, or I'm sorry, Friday, for our emergency preparedness training. I would love to see a lot of you out there. So thank you guys.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.